I'm Arthur Piccolo, CEO New Sports Group, LLC. We commissioned an independent study by a leading global sports information and research firm, Sports Business Communications, headquartered in London, England, to produce a study on the future of sports in the 21st century. New Sports is the business of New Sports Group, LLC. We are about to begin developing a new team sport. We wanted to have a respected independent research firm do a sophisticated analysis of the sports business environment. Exactly how dynamic it is as we develop and then seek to market a new global team sport. This report substantiates just how robust and pregnant with potential the sports industry is for a new sport that captures the popular imagination. Watch this brief introductory video and please read the report.
Hello, my name's Philip Savage. I'm Director at Sport Business Communications. I'd like to tell you about a new report we've been working on entitled New Sports in the 21st Century, a Disruptive Opportunity. I'm the editor of the report. My background is in financial services. I've been analysing it for various media organisations over the years, looking at emerging markets and the law. I turned my attention to sport, having completed my MBA, and I now spend my time bringing financial thinking to the world of sport. Sport Business has been going for around 20 years, providing information to the business sector of sport. We're trusted by the leading players in Europe, in Asia, and of course in North America. Our client, New Sports Group, came to us because they wanted an independent organisation to test their assertion that a new sport is more likely than not to emerge. They also wanted to provide investors with an opportunity, perhaps not available elsewhere, for some financial thinking and analysis to be applied to the world of sport. So we've spent the past few months looking at data, conducting research, interviews and analysis to bring you this new report analysing the potential impact of a new sport in the 21st century. Obviously, I'd like to encourage you to get hold of a copy of the report and study it at length, but let me give you 4 headlines from our findings. The first headline is that the sports economy is growing. It's outpacing the wider economy and looks set to do so for some considerable time. The second headline is that the sporting landscape is surprisingly dynamic. Scratch beneath the surface, and it's a very turbulent environment with lots of change going on. Third, and this is no surprise to anybody, the world is changing, and some of the volatility that we've seen in other sectors is starting to make its effects in sport. So there's money in sport, it's a dynamic sector and subject to changes from the wider world. So our conclusion is that these factors in combination do indeed make it more likely that a new sport will emerge. One of the things that we do in our report is look at the factors, the criteria that need to be in place for a sport not just to emerge, but to thrive and grab some market share. Before we get into the details of the report, a quick word about the growth of the sports economy. In the report, we quote data from PwC, the Global Business Services Organisation. They're predicting compound annual growth around the sport of average of 3.7%. They're also predicting that will be slightly higher in North America at just over 4%. There are 4 main revenue lines in sport. There's ticketing, there's media, there's sponsorship, and there's merchandise. Now these split neatly into 2, with ticketing and merchandise representing the money that you and I as individuals spend on sport, and media and sponsorship coming from the corporate world. Ticketing and merchandise are both set to expand steadily, around 2.5% around the world. The factors driving that growth are an increase in ticket prices, but also a proliferation of sports events. Media growth is considerably faster, trending at around 4.8% globally and 5.3% in North America. And sponsorship is faster still. It tops 5% globally and above 6% in North America. Now, the significance of this data is not just that it shows the sports sector is thriving. Most of us can see that from the media coverage. But it shows that there are some structural reasons why sport will continue to thrive. And it has to do with advertisers seeking to align themselves with sport as other marketing opportunities decline in effectiveness. It has to do with broadcasters needing to fill their airwaves with sports content. And those things are set to continue. So although sport benefits from strong fundamentals, our study found that it's a lot more uncertain than it appears. I'm standing in one of the UK's leading centres for cricket. Just over my shoulder is the hallowed turf, and all around me are the memorabilia and icons of cricket from a bygone age. In fact, this place is a bit of a metaphor for the sport itself. Cricket, of course, is enormous in the Indian subcontinent, but elsewhere, in a few short decades, it's gone from being a globally dominant sport to one which is really quite marginal. Cricket's not alone, of course. In the 1960s, 70s and 80s, the Olympic Games was the Cold War platform on which the world's superpowers played out their war games. The problem is that too many of the Olympic audience still remember those times, and the Olympic movement has struggled to find a new, younger audience. But let's bring things right up to date. Today, the build-up for the Manny Pacquiao-Floyd Mayweather boxing matchup is in full swing. It may be the richest boxing match in history, but scratch below the surface, go below that very top layer, and boxing has all but disappeared. We see in Formula One motor racing huge turbulence and potential bankruptcy among a number of teams. There's disruption, of course, in the America's Cup too. Even the mighty NFL faces an existential challenge with the problems of concussion. Soccer too may be the world's favourite game, but it's constantly affected by accusations of corruption, by poor governance and by match fixing. Now, we're not saying that these sports are going to disappear. In fact, far from it. But they face threats as well as opportunities. So the question is, if today's biggest sports were to be pegged back, what would fill the gap? Because there will be a gap. Those sponsorship dollars, those broadcast dollars have got to go somewhere. So what sports would step into the breach? Well, looking around the sporting landscape, that's not easy to determine. There seems to be no good reason, in our view, why the existing sports, the traditional sports, would suddenly grab new market share. In fact, it seems perfectly clear to us that there's at least the same chance of a new sport capturing the attention of the public and the media as there is for a legacy sport to suddenly grab a new opportunity. So we have to conclude that the dynamic within sport makes it at least as likely for a new sport to emerge as an old sport to grow. We spend some time in the report looking at changes in the wider world. It's no surprise to anybody that the world changes at a faster rate than ever. Some of the changes we're only starting to get to grips with, but they are disrupting business models in many, many different sectors. When we think about trends like globalization, it's clear sport has gone with the trend. Sport is very much a global product. Other areas, sport has embraced the internet. To a greater or lesser extent, it's looked at new media. But in its core product, actually sport remains largely unchanged and unaffected by the kind of disruption that we've seen in, say, the movie business or the music business. It's marketed itself on tradition, on heritage, and that marketing has served it very well. But for how much longer? Is that logic of sponsorship money, that logic of broadcast dollars, suggest that sport will reinvent itself. It will either reinvent itself or it will be replaced by new, dynamic sporting entertainment, which the media and the brands will be able to get behind. One of the things we've looked at in the report are media consumption habits among the generations. The Generation X's, those born between 1960 and 1990, were happy with long-form video content, but that trend radically changes as we look at today's young people. And Talk to Sports, as we interviewed around 30 major sports executives for this report, talk to them, and most of them are pinning their hopes on young people reverting to the habits of their parents. They're hoping that as they become parents themselves, as they become more mature, that they'll settle back into the sofa and adopt the long-form content that their parents did. Some of them are adapting their sport for the next generation. They're making it shorter, they're making it slightly more shareable, but none of them has worked out how to make money out of it. That's not to say they won't. Sport has a tremendous track record of turning adversity into advantage. But logic dictates that those sports who are better adapted to the new world will survive better. And that has to be the case for a new sport that's optimised for the world of social media, the world of new media consumption habits. In fact, we can see a time coming when a new sport will leapfrog the legacy sports that have to reinvent themselves by presenting themselves as perfectly adapted to the new world. So the economic fundamentals are strong for sport. The dynamism is unquestioned in the sector, and it is subject to change from outside. But what likely effect is that going to have? Well, to understand how sport and its future may play out, we've run some scenarios, and these are included in the report. We looked at 5 years, we looked at 10 years, and we factored in questions such as legalisation of gambling. We factored in potential shake-up to the broadcast model. We looked at the rise of e-gaming and fantasy gaming. And we brought in some of the factors that we see outside and yet to have make their effect in sport, such as big data, for example. What we found was quite interesting, and I encourage you to look at the report and check this out. But one of the conclusions was that those sports running with a very high cost model are particularly vulnerable to shake-ups. Change tends to favour organisations with lower costs because they're more nimble, they're more able to adapt. And it appears certainly to us that there is a potential threat to those sports running with very high costs. A small change in their revenue mix could cascade right to the bottom line and call into question their entire business model. We also looked at what might happen if venture capital investment was attracted into sport. And this is potentially the most exciting scenario of all. Not that VC investment has been common in sport. In fact, sport has been somewhat of a closed shop. But what would happen if sports did go out and find not just money, but the kind of thinking, analysis and scrutiny that VC investment tends to bring with it? Well, our conclusion is that were sport to attract the attention of venture capital investors and hire the kind of talent that's seen more commonly in, for example, the tech sector, the result is likely to be creative, potentially disruptive, potentially explosive. There's a lot more that I could say, and I would encourage you to get a hold of a copy of the report and look for some more of the detail yourselves. But will a new sport emerge? Sports crazes emerge in every generation. But we are at a unique moment in time where, if anything, the odds are balanced slightly in favour of a new sport emerging and thriving. It seems to us that there's no good reason to assume that the current landscape of sport is fixed, and there's every good chance that a new sport will emerge. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it's almost certain to happen. So the question that remains then is, who's going to be positioned, who's going to be placed and around to take advantage of it? And that's
What you have just heard from Philip Savage, and what you will read in this detailed report about the future of the business of sports, provides a perspective you will not find elsewhere. And I challenge you to search the internet and try to find another report that takes a comprehensive look at the future of sports, anything like this report does. The powerful point made so well here is that there are vast unrealized opportunities in sports, specifically in brand new sports that address the 21st century and young people most of all. Unlike virtually every other industry today, in sports we have not seen that level of innovation. That is about to change.